Hey guys, Alec Hunter here with 5 9 Gaming, and today we get to do something that is one of my favorite activities, and that's speculate about Marvel. I am joined by Nolar
What's up, everyone?
and Nazdarachi,
Hello.
and I want to get this out of the way right up front. Huge spoiler warnings for WandaVision. We, at least up through episode 5, we're going to be discussing all kinds of different theories, our theories, as well as some that we found online about how mutants may be entering the MCU. If you guys caught the end of WandaVision episode 5, you saw that Pietro showed up, but it was the Evan Peters version of Quicksilver, not Aaron Taylor Johnson's, which of course set the internet completely ablaze, trying to figure out what's going on with that. We'll get to multiverse stuff in a second, but I think one of the ways they could bring mutants into the MCU is through radiation, which is basically this trope used in the Silver Age of comic books to explain how a lot of superheroes got their powers. Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Hulk. This wouldn't technically make them mutants, but maybe if it activated something like the X gene. Naz, what do you think about that?
I think that, well, we all know that this has mostly been a licensing problem up until now. Various studios owning different, movie rights to different parts of the overall Marvel hemisphere. So we had Sony still owns Spider-Man, Universal owned Hulk, and then Fox was the big one that owned the X-Men, which was recently, within the past 2-ish years, acquired by Disney. So now they finally own the ability to combine them, but due to the pre-existence of, the X-Men 1 through 3, some of the X-Men Legends, like the Wolverine movies, and then I believe, doesn't Bryan Singer direct the Days of Future Past version of the X-Men?
He was a producer on that, but the first 3 he directed. The first one, I'm pretty sure, like the original X-Men in 2000. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the alternate team of X-Men that's not like the Hugh Jackman squad, They were those. And because of the pre-existence of those and some of the mixed reception to them, we were under the impression that Marvel was just going to keep them on a back burner for a while and kind of let it stew, not use them immediately, to kind of put some distance between the X-Men and the mutants that the cinematic world has already seen versus this new version that they're going to do. This is the first time that we've seen any sort of mutant or X-Men integration with the MCU whatsoever, and I think it's a great way to start introducing them. However, it does bring up a lot of questions as how they're going to, write in, or I guess rewrite, if you will, the excuse for why they exist in the first place. So I don't want to get ahead of myself too much here, but I do have a lot of faith in Kevin Feige and the likes of Favreau and James Gunn and all the people that kind of collaborate on the MCU to be able to spin this in a way that audiences will have a pretty decent reception to. Again, we've seen a lot of deviations from the comics to the movies. Like, just one main example would be like Infinity War, Thanos. His whole motivation in the comics revolves around his infatuation with the literal embodiment of death as a being. They completely neglected all of that in the actual MCU, and as far as we know, death, no one's interacted with him, her, it at all at this point. So I actually kind of like that because, similarly to comparing like Dragon Ball Super manga to the anime or something like that, it leaves room for new surprises and differences that offer kind of a fresh take on things and make it, not just the same origin story over and over again. So I'm pretty excited about the mutants finally joining up with, the MCU. And, again, it's something that we've been teased and hearing about for a while now, bringing Deadpool into the MCU, bringing X-Men in, and all these things that actually do relate to each other behind the scenes. Fantastic Four, another huge IP that has characteristically performed extremely bad in Hollywood, but is very, very popular in the comic hemisphere that I believe needs another rework. But again, I think they're just letting it breathe for a little bit before they just start throwing everything in at once.
Yeah. Just to take it off from Naz's hands there in the sense that bringing the MCU with mutants, it's interesting. Radiation seems to be a trope, like you said, typical in the comics. It could be used here, and the biggest thing, as Nas said, is sometimes they have to change the plot a little bit or the way they do things, because comics are one medium, doesn't necessarily translate across to the big medium that is TV, movies. So they'll have to again, they've shown that they're capable of making some good changes and implementing those to work for the medium that they're in, which is TV and movies. So I have all faith and confidence that the radiation, it seems like, would be the one way to do it, right? Could just change the X gene, as you said, and therefore it's mutated, giving them special powers. But more importantly, I think in WandaVision we've kind of had that kind of laid out, right? So in the Reddit thread, which we will post a link down below, there was a mention that there's a lot of repeated radiation inside Westview itself, and they don't know what the effects are. Maybe that's how the mutants are getting introduced. Like the entire town may produce mutants themselves, right? So that's one way that it could enter and just be this nexus starting point for getting the mutants inside the MCU.
Yeah, they kind of fluff the term up a little bit by calling it CMBR, Cosmic Microwave Background Radiation. But if you simplify that down to like the heyday of Marvel Comics, like the golden age of comics, it's just cosmic radiation, right?
Yeah.
Cosmic radiation is the cause of like 80% of, the mutations or classic superheroes that are, not in the same vein as like Batman and Tony Stark, who are just normal people but with exceptional abilities or technology. It's usually cosmic radiation that's to blame for a lot of that stuff. So yeah, they've cleverly wove that into their little intricate basket they're weaving here, which is another little point, not to deviate too far, but even if the movies haven't done the most, ingenuous way of rewriting the story, like plot holes from the comics, the way that they layer it with all of the other MCU properties really makes up for that. I mean, everything is just very intricately spun together, and MCU is probably the best example of a movie franchise that's been able to do this across so many properties.
Right. Pulling it back to what you said actually about the CMBR, in the episode, Director Hayward describes it as relic radiation dating back to the Big Bang. So I was thinking that's basically the energy that was there when the universe was created, like some kind of creation energy. So maybe something happens to that hexagon around Westview that causes that creation energy to like blow up and go across the planet, activating the dormant X gene or superpowers within people. Like how they used the Mind Stone to unlock the powers of Scarlet Witch and Vision, or Quicksilver.
Yep. Yeah.
I liked that excuse about how the intense radiation from the snap being done on Earth twice put out, enough cosmic radiation to alter genes and stuff too.
Yeah, that's definitely another place where the radiation could come from, if radiation is what's activating the powers. We did have Hulk and Tony in a matter of hours, I think, snap the Infinity Gauntlet, like use it twice on Earth. We don't know what kind of ramifications that power surge could have either.
Yeah, and then 5 years prior, Thanos used it. So that's 3 giant bursts of radiation all on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only downside to using radiation to introduce the mutants into the MCU is to me the whole appeal of the mutant storyline, the X-Men and all that. It's really about humans versus mutants at that point, right? There's the Brotherhood and all that kind of storyline that feels much more impactful to me, as opposed to we're starting to grow mutants, and that conflict wouldn't be inherent into the storyline until much down the line. So I'm not saying this is a bad way to do it, but the only downside to me is that we won't ever see the intense conflict between Professor X and Magneto whenever they get cast or recast or whatever the case may be, until, if you started off with this way, down the line, like 15-20 years, right? So
it definitely does mess with the X-Men specifically's backstory, because
right.
Eric Lencher and Xavier have been friends for years, and they've had their powers like essentially the whole time, right? And then you have like Wolverine, who's known about his mutant powers since like World War I, or whenever he was born. And
well, even well before that, James Howlett was born in like colonial
the classical
time.
era, old colonial times almost. So it definitely will mess with a little bit of that, unless they find a way to, I don't know, maybe just like the radiation has intensified it, but mutants have been hiding for a while. Like they'll have to have some cleverly crafted reasoning behind this to get it to transition well, right? Because like Nalar just said, if Xavier and Magneto are just being quote unquote born right now in the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
it'll take time.
They're not going to have the same motivations, the same life experiences based on having been persecuted their whole lives, etc. So it'll definitely change things quite a bit.
Yep.
Now, see, the beautiful thing about Marvel is they have 2 magic words that fix all of those problems. And those words are what if. So anybody who's read a what if comic knows that it's alternate universes. It's different storylines, different takes, from different points. What if Spider-Man would have kept the powers of Captain Universe? What if the Phoenix Force wouldn't have killed Jean Grey? Those stories exist, and they open up the idea of the multiverse, which we know is a thing in the MCU because, well, looking ahead at Doctor Strange's new film, it's called In the Multiverse of Madness. So the cool thing about the multiverse is it's unlimited possibility. It's maybe a little bit of a lazy writer's tool, but I mean, honestly, it's unlimited possibility. You want to have, I don't know, Wanda's dead brother show up at the end of episode 5 of WandaVision, but she already said she won't bring something back from the dead. Oh, let's just pull a Pietro out of whatever other Earth we can find. It just so happens that it looks like the one from the Fox universe.
Yeah. Yeah, so the best thing about this episode, and again, if it hasn't been obvious, guys, it's spoilers. She, in the middle of the episode, she never said her brother died to her 2 twin sons, right? She always said he's far away. So knowing like what these kids are in the comics, Speed and Wiccan, I think that's their names. It could be that they were trying to find their uncle, but couldn't find them in this universe because he's dead in this universe. And they looked somewhere else, aka the Fox X-Men universe, and pulled him out of that. And that could be the easiest way to slot in the MCU with the X-Men, storyline too, and put them together and be like, well, the X-Men storyline always existed. There's just another universe, right? And we can pull characters from there and put them in. So like technically, you could just canonize all the X-Men Fox films and make them part of the MCU. It's just literally an alternate reality. Which then, because we have Evan Peters, I think that's his name, show up as Pietro, okay, can we get Hugh Jackman back? Right? Is it a possibility? Is it possible we could get James McAvoy or even like Halle Berry back as Storm? There's just so many possibilities that the story opens that it's cool. And again, I mean, I agree with you. It's kind of lazy writing because, it's just like, oh, it's just a multiverse. It's just an alternate universe. But to make everything pretty, in lockstep and in sync, that's probably the easiest way to do it, personally. So
yeah, they've already laid the framework for that. Again, referencing the Infinity War and Endgame saga. They just have to make like a quick flashback or reference to that whole scene between, Banner and the Ancient One, where she's like, in my timeline, we won't have the Infinity Stones anymore, and this creates a divergence, and this and that. They basically laid the whole framework for multiple realities in that movie. So that would be a great way to maybe do some of it. It would be kind of a cop-out if they just pull all of the X-Men and stuff. Like, oh, they just all pre-existed in another universe, but they're here now.
Yeah.
But if it's done well, like, again, I don't think it's necessarily just Scarlet Witch or her 2 kids. I think that there's some greater powers that be here. Like, you mentioned this off-camera, Nalar, but there seems to be, in the show, heavy emphasis being put on them blaming Scarlet Witch. But every time someone says her, it never specifically references Elizabeth Olsen's character, right? Scarlet Witch. So, like, for example, when Vision grabs his co-worker's head and, temporarily frees him, that dude's freaking out. She's like, she's got control of me. It's all her. It's painful. It's a nightmare. It's this and that. And we, as the audience, are left to assume that he means Scarlet Witch. But more realistically, I think he's talking about that creepy neighbor, whose name I can't remember right now. But I think that's either Mephisto would be the most likely answer, or like a Hydra situation that is manipulating Scarlet Witch to some effect that we as the audience are not aware of yet. So that could also have a huge role on how the multiverse gets introduced, if it's a character like Mephisto as well. Because, he's a very powerful, basically the devil in Marvel.
Yep.
And he has a lot of arcane abilities that also run in the same kind of plot vein that Scarlet Witch is going towards.
Mm-hmm. So building off that, whatever caused the Westview anomaly, let's say maybe it weakened the barrier between realities, and somehow Fox's Quicksilver managed to fall into Westview. Would it then be easy to assume that the Hex writes his memories so he thinks he's Wanda's brother?
I mean, it seemed that way from the way that he walked in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Like he walked in the door and he recognized Wanda immediately, but she took a second to figure out what was going on, which I would assume would basically be like the audience's reaction was basically emulating her and Vision's reaction. Like, who the hell is this guy? Mm-hmm. Why is he here? What?
And to that fact, Pietro doesn't even recognize Vision. He's like, who's that? You know what I mean? So
who's the popsicle?
He's the popsicle, right? Exactly. So to that effect, like it's kind of interesting that there's, at least right now, especially the way the show's been playing out, they've been only showing specific sides for a reason, like clearly. But as it stands, it's just like we fill in the blank of, oh, that's Pietro from the the Fox movies, the X-Men movies, and he's just playing the way his character. It could also be in the next episode, which is in like 3-4 days from now. We find out that not really real, or whatever the case may be, might be a manifestation. But as it stands, like, we are just filling in the blanks for us, and I think they're doing that by design, because it is right. It's a shock, right? You're like, oh my god, I can't believe they just merged the two potential universes together. So you're just trying to fill in the blanks as you go, but they purposely leave it that way, just to then pull the rug out of you the next episode or the next 2-3 episodes. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That and there's also some kind of quirky timeline, like, I guess coincidences you could say, where wasn't it like Quicksilver, he was in X-Men Apocalypse that took place in the 80s. This episode was framed around like an 80s type theme.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he was also in Dark Phoenix, which I think takes place in the 90s. So, and this sitcom era blends 80s and 90s stuff, because you do have some references to like Full House, which was more popular in the 90s. So yeah, I do think it's kind of convenient that the version of Quicksilver they get is from one who would be timeline appropriate for the sitcom era they're in.
Yep, exactly.
So, over on Reddit, one of the users said that they they said the amount of power needed for her to create all the props seemed higher than she was capable of. So he theorizes that she's pulling stuff from alternate dimensions, including her brother, and that they're going to use that as a way to canonize all of the old X-Men movies in an alternate universe, like we mentioned earlier. And that the comics have done these mergers before. And that's actually a really great point, because, like, even dipping away from Marvel for a second and going over to DC, when they wrote the story The Flash of Two Worlds in like the 1970s, there were two Flashes, Jay Garrick and I think it was Barry Allen. Mm-hmm. And when they wrote that story, they had them meet and they established Earth 2. And so Jay Garrick was from Earth 2 and Barry Allen was from Earth 1. Years later, Crisis on Infinite Earths would come through and merge all those Earths into one Earth, creating Earth Prime, where you have both Jay Garrick and, well, not Barry because of things that happen in Crisis on Infinite Earths, Spoiler alert for like a 40-year-old story. He died saving the multiverse.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
I could see this maybe being a subtle influence behind the scenes, but I also have to go back full circle to the episode. And I didn't think this one particular scene was extremely well done, but it illustrated the point they needed to get across, where she finds her like disco outfit and shoots her handgun at it, and it basically, the bullet doesn't penetrate through the clothes because it's literally made out. It's a amalgamation of the outfit she was wearing when she had got sucked into the hex. So it actually took her clothes and reconstructed them, but left the ingredients, like the base materials, the same. So I don't know if she's necessarily pulling stuff literally from other dimensions. Well, maybe people or souls she is. But it seems like a lot of the physical stuff is actually like in a state of flux. Like it's changing. Like the matter is reorganizing into whatever is needed to fit the theme of the the sitcom or whatever. So with that, I don't know. And I also, again, I don't even know if it's her doing everything. Like I am still in the camp where she's being her grief. Like her grief. Some entity saw how powerful she was. Like they even reference it, like, oh, she could have taken out Thanos if he didn't call down a orbital bombardment. Like they specifically said that line in the show. Right. So some entity has noticed her power and capitalized on how easy it is to manipulate someone when they're in an intense state of grief. So I'm still in that camp that thinks that there's much more powerful forces involved that we haven't really become aware of yet.
So, Naz, you've read comics, like specifically Marvel comics, for a long time now, right?
On and off, yeah. Go ahead.
If I was going to go like way left field with a theory, you'd be able to follow me, at least as a comic book fan, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's literally almost nothing they haven't done, so anything is basically on the table.
Okay, so a couple of years back, there was a story called Incursions. What was happening was the multiverse was contracting. Earths would collide, and if you didn't destroy one Earth, then both Earths would be destroyed. Very complex, convoluted comic book story that led up to the new Secret Wars and the Battle World and all this other crazy stuff. But anyway, and I don't necessarily think this is happening because I think it's, a little too early to just introduce the multiverse and then be like, oh yeah, by the way, it's collapsing.
Yeah.
But what if there's an incursion happening specifically between Earth, 199,999, which is the MCU, and Earth 10,005, which is the Fox X-Men universe? Do you think that could be a possibility?
I think as opposed to them making a new event out of it, like you just said, like the incursion is happening, they might spin it and rework it into like, oh, when the snap or the blip happened, it caused this incursion-esque effect that just started pulling people from, like, whoever was in Soul World just started getting thrown back over here, whether they were originally from this version of Earth or not, right? So, like, in the blip, someone gets erased, but they get replaced by an alternate universe's version of themselves that maybe had already died some way in their own universe and just ended up in Soul World or something, right? There's something like that where they'll use it retroactively to maybe help explain what happened. Like, oh, because of the blip, all of a sudden this version of Earth, essentially the 1999 version that you mentioned and the 10,005 version, like they must have merged somewhere, and our realities have come together. Like, I feel like it would be like a conversation in passing used as justification as to why things are happening, as opposed to like a brand new
focus
event.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna start off with that. Like, just sorry to cut you off, Nas, but like, I think like it'll be a passing remark or two, just a couple of lines, so that if people like us were watching and really being focused on it, we'd catch it, and that would like give us the full story. While if you didn't catch it, you didn't care too much, it wouldn't really affect your enjoyment of the movie, the TV show, the story, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially personified with the two kids, the Speed and Wiccan. Like your average surface level MCU Marvel only movie watcher is not going to know who they are or anything about them. But the comics, like wink, wink, nudge, nudge type behavior, right?
Yeah. A lot of Easter eggs, and I mean Marvel does that. It placates the hardcore fans, and those who don't pick up on it, it's not a big deal, right? So I mean that's the best thing about it is they can cater to all of their audience, and no matter what, like their main directive, and this is why they've, at least to me, have been so successful, is like we just want to make a good TV show, we want to make a good movie, and then we can pepper in all this other stuff, but the main focus is this, right? So. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty interesting. We'll see how it goes. I mean, the last thing I wanted to mention is, could this be like a reverse of what actually happened in the comics, where instead of Wanda saying no more mutants, she could be like, no, more mutants. Like, bring them all in, right? So, I mean, that could be,
Bring them all.
that could be the way she does it too, right?
Specifically referencing what the House of M, right?
Right.
The inverse.
Which we
House
know was
of
a
M.
source for this.
Yeah, that's pretty much the source for that. But like, it could just like flip it on its head, where it's like we'll just bring everything in, and she's just responsible for that. So
yeah, and a lot of the speculation we have is also coming from outside of the direct movie canon, right? Like when you look at the studios and their activity, right? Well, we know that Disney acquired Fox. We know they're going to want to make money off the X-Men. We know that they also own the Fantastic Four. If they bring Mephisto into the show, well, we know that there's comic arcs where Doctor Doom deals with Mephisto, Doctor Strange, tons of people. So it gives them all these different layered opportunities to rework the story into a format that will fit well onto, the big screen or the streaming services, but won't be identical to the comics.
Right.
And I think they have a lot of room to breathe in this department, right? Because some of the comics, just being so old, they're maybe not vague, but it's just really easy to work with that and to build something.
Absolutely. And that's really the best part of all of it, is those of us with the inherent knowledge from outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, those of us with the comics knowledge, those of us with the industry knowledge, we just get to speculate more crazy stuff. I mean, so really what I want to know is what all of you guys think down in the comments below. Make sure you tell us. But that's going to wrap things up for us today, guys. I am Alec Hunter, I'm joined by Nolar and Nas. You guys want to say peace out?
I want to pose one more question to the audience, which they can leave in the comments or just think about. But who do you think is going to show up first? Like a more organized version of the X-Men, which would be teased more so by Pietro or Quicksilver here? Or do you think the Fantastic Four? Like, which ones do you think are going to be put together and put on display first because of all this? I would love to see what their audience reaction to that is.
Yeah, and then on my end, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the speculation videos. I mean, we have knowledge. We're not the most knowledgeable, but I mean, hopefully you enjoyed it. So let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, we'll do another one. So thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, peace out, everybody.
Take it easy.